Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today we have another great guest. As our ongoing subscribers know, often on this podcast, I will share ideas, insights, and best practices for networking. Occasionally, however, I'll be interviewing a guest, awesome and interesting people who will share their story, answer some questions, and tell us how we can use networking to grow our professional lives. Today I have on the program Donna Riccardo. If you are a listener of this program, and hopefully everybody is, you know that a couple weeks ago I released a podcast with our Expedition Networking segment where Donna shared her journey. We won't get into all of that, but for those who are, if you didn't hear that, please go listen to it. If you did, I'm going to kind of quickly go through Donna's background. She has 30 years of public speaking and training experience. In her original career, she was a hairdresser in a high-end salon in New York City, where she mastered one-to-one communication and image. Later, she was drawn to teach and found out the hard way that teaching is also public speaking. After 17 years, she left the beauty industry and started training students in a personal training and development company where she spent 20 years. From that experience, she brings the art of how to coach and support people in fulfilling on what is most important to them. She's a longtime and current member of Toastmasters, which is known for their public speaking clubs, and she's achieved the highest award within Toastmasters. And I was in Toastmasters for several years. She's a distinguished Toastmasters, and I'm telling you, that is not an easy thing. She's trained in NLP. She's a trained NLP practitioner, and NLP, for those who don't know, stands for, and we got to be careful on this, neuro-linguistic programming. I just say NLP, I know what it is. At any rate, Donna, I want to welcome you to the program. Anything I missed on any of that you can think of?
I'm also an active and current member of the National Speakers Association as well.
Thank you. Well, I talk a lot on the program about business relationships in general, professional networking, business networking, and three words that are continually said here are know, like, and trust. Mm-hmm. And you're the communication expert. Speaking expert. And I just think it's hard to be known if you're not communicating well. And it's certainly hard to be liked if you're not communicating well. And that all then ties into trust. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to kind of really take a deep dive into some of the things that you coach and train your clientele on with respect to how to be good at these sorts of things. So what wisdom can you give us?
Well, so there are a lot of places a person can go and get tips on public speaking, what to do, how to do it, where to look, how many people do I look at a time, or just one at a time? What do I do with my hands? How do I move across the front of the stage? What do I wear? There's a lot of that out there, right? And I include that when I work with people. But what I think is even more important is starting with who we are, because it's our relationship with ourselves is what really matters. And I say that public speaking is an inside job because that's where it starts. That's where we have to deal with ourselves first, because who we are, wherever we go, there we are. And that includes when we're in front of the room, in front of our audience. So we have to deal with ourselves so that we can show up powerfully and be complete with ourselves in the situation and be fully present. And then there's other people, right? What you were saying, that networking and relationships, mostly for quite a long time, people, when they're speaking, they will get their speaking opportunities through networking groups or people they know, the relationships they have, or new ones that they make. And if they're not great with people, like all we really have is each other. There's only people out there. And if you're not great with people, just not going to be invited to speak or invited back or referred or much of anything else if people don't feel connected to you. And then I also like to say that how you show up. So all this has to do with how you show up for yourself, how you show up for others, and how you show
Right.
up in your physical appearance. Like the way you dress matters because you need to dress in a way that speaks to the audience, that doesn't put them off or make them feel disconnected. So I really emphasize showing up as the place to start your public speaking journey.
Now,
fill it in if you haven't done it already.
yeah. Now, I guess just to fill in some of the things that we talked about in the we had you on the earlier this month. You're the CEO and founder of a company called Red Stiletto, which is a public speaking training company. And I can hear people saying, well, I don't like to speak in front of people. I don't care. There's nothing that this person has to offer, and that's fine. I get it. But in you and I talking before, and we've talked a couple of times now, you're of the mind that we're always public speaking. We're always kind of presenting ourselves, right? And I think people tend to forget that those little conversations are, the same rules apply. It might not be a 30-minute presentation in front of 3,000 people, but the stakes are probably just as high. You're at a networking event, there's a small, opportunity to small talk with somebody. What would be some advice you might give somebody with respect to how they handle that particular situation? Obviously, you can't have it written out because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Usually.
Right. Well, I like to say the networking is one-to-one public speaking, unless it's to the small group like you were just mentioning, right?
Yeah.
You might have a couple people around, or maybe you speak to a group at your table, or, if it's a small enough group, you can speak and say something to the whole room at once, right? That's kind of your networking scenarios. And it helps to know your thing, know your stuff, and have that prepared to say, and have what you, like what I just said to you about the ways to show up. With those are, I say it a little bit differently every time, but that's what I want to be known for. That's what I want people to think of when they think of public speaking. And so it's really important when you're in these networking scenarios to narrow it down to one thing. And I can hear all the people screaming right now, but I do this and I do that and I do this and I do that. But I think people would rather go to somebody who is more of an expert and really knows something about their profession, and their expertise is something specific, and they're more memorable that way than that person that does 4 different things.
Yeah, I tell people that when they start spewing things, the way the human mind works is when they hear the first thing, it starts kind of processing that, and then when the second thing comes out, and that might be a second later, it starts processing on the second, and then the third, and if there's 4, it kind of stops on the last one, but there's a level of confusion in the brain. And I'm not a neuroscientist. I just sense a level of confusion when I'm in these conversations. Oh, you do siding, windows, doors, it's just
Right. And while a person might do all those things, they're not going to be memorable if they try to talk about them all at once. I mean, we can probably think of almost any company, things that they're known for. All right, silly example, McDonald's. What do you think of right away? Right? Hamburgers.
Yeah.
Right? But don't they have all these other things, right? They have milkshakes and they have fish sandwiches and they have French fries, and they have all these other things, but that's not what you think of first.
No, I think that's a good analogy. I've never thought of that, and I will use it. I will use it. When we spoke earlier on the earlier show, you talked about kind of your journey, and that's really what Expedition Networking, that segment's all about. So I don't want to relive that whole story there, but there was a piece there that kind of when you were in New York City, you had a different communication style. I'll let you share it, but you had a different communication style than what you had ended up having in Denver, Colorado, which you're currently located. You want to kind of share that transition and how that's important?
Yeah. So in those days, my communication style was all about me. was all about me. I would talk all about me, and my poor captive listener would be in my chair having to listen about me, and I'd solicit advice from them, and it was all about me. And I stopped doing hair for quite a while, moved across the country and started doing hair again. And I was still kind of acting like that as I started up again. At some point, it wasn't growing the way I wanted it to, as I was starting from scratch because I knew no one. And at some point, it came together for me that it was never going to be different than it had been back then if I kept doing the same thing. And my attention needed to be on the other person and listening to them and finding out what's important to them and being interested in them and having my attention be on the other person and not myself.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. And I had shared on the program that I can tell when I'm having conversations, and I don't want to say it's not about me, when the person does a good job of kind of including both of us. And again, it's, speaking is really communicating, and part of communicating is asking and then listening and then communicating and asking, just kind of a back and forth and a back and forth. What do you say to the person who is they don't like, not public speaking, right? I mean, that's totally off the table, but just even getting into conversations. I don't want to go to the event. I don't want to speak up at meetings. What sort of advice would you kind of get them to kind of move off of that? Like, well, again, I have the privilege of talking to you earlier, and you were, I don't know if you used the word introverted in high school, but introverted is the word. Okay.
Very.
And so you've really kind of come out of your shell. But what advice would you give to that person who's just like, I just can't do this. I can't.
Yeah, it's I think a two-part piece. One
Please.
is become interested in others. And the other piece is learn to listen. And then, circle back to point one, become interested in what they're saying. Listen, become interested.
Okay, that's simple. And I think that's good advice, is that it's not about what you have to say. It's really about what you're getting the other person to say. And the people I know who are really the most successful at building relationships are really good at that. You kind of walk away and like, wow, they were really interested in me. That's great.
I'll tell you a funny little secret.
Okay.
That I like to share this as a secret, is that if the
this is a podcast now, so your secret's blown. Go ahead.
I don't think I made this up. I think I heard it somewhere and it's stuck.
Okay.
But if the other person is doing most of the talking and you are doing most of the listening, they will think you are a great conversationalist.
I've heard that as well. And that is totally counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's completely counterintuitive to our line of thinking, because you do go to events and I think we've all been cornered by that person. I have been that person, I've been that person. I need to, if I stop to breathe, I'm going to lose their interest. And in reality, I've lost their interest because I haven't stopped to breathe. And it's, but just the whole counterintuitive, just shutting up and listening. I think that's a powerful lesson for us to. That's a powerful lesson for us to, just kind of think about as we're out there talking. And sometimes we're with that, we'll call it that business icon, that person that we're just happy to be in the same vicinity with. And this will be our only opportunity. We just need to kind of take advantage of it. Let's talk about your business. Let's talk about Red Stiletto and things that you're currently working on, things that, our audience could potentially participate in. That would be helpful. Okay.
So two main things right now. I'm currently working one-to-one with people to craft a signature talk, which it could also be known as a speak to sell talk or a promotional talk, but it's designed to connect with your audience, teach them something, not talk about yourself, but teach them something, and then make some kind of an offer depending on your product or service for them to either buy something or connect further and have a conversation about the possibility of doing business together. So crafting those talks together, one-to-one with people. And
now,
then,
excuse me, how long are those talks? I mean, we're not talking about a 30-second commercial. We're
no,
talking, okay.
yeah, we're talking about, they usually end up around 20 to 30 minutes. I really just talk with people and coach them and ask questions. When they start repeating themselves, then we move on to the next section. That's how it ends up. But then I show them and I share with them some guidelines on how to make their talk longer or shorter, depending on the amount of time they get invited to speak for. So they can adjust it, but at least they have the framework.
Okay.
And
all
some
right.
content.
Yeah. Do you have any success stories? I'm sure you have. Can you share a success story that, just, hey, here was this person, and I assume companies are probably sending people to you, or people come, or a little of both?
It's more entrepreneurs, because
Okay.
it's more the people that are there. It's the face of their business. They're the face of their business, and they're
Okay.
the ones that are out there, speaking to gain business. Well, I really have been doing this since right before COVID. So my people haven't really gotten out there and spoken yet, but I can share one specific thing. And she was just thrilled. So I had a lady who does virtual staging for homes. So she, rather than putting the furniture in for an empty house, she is an artist. And in the beginning of her business 20 years ago, she used to draw the furniture in the empty rooms for people to see when they weren't getting actual furniture in them. So now it's evolved into, graphic design program and like that. And she makes it look like, virtually, she makes it look like it has real furniture in it with shadows and details. And it's really quite amazing. And she had been speaking to realtors, groups of realtors, that would be her main people she'd want to partner with, for 2 years, on the average of twice a month for 40 people about a month. I think we figured out it ended up she'd spoken to about 960 people in the last 2 years.
Wow.
And when she shared with me what she'd been doing and saying, it didn't make sense. First, it didn't even make sense. And second, she hadn't gotten any kinds of connections, people wanting to talk further with her, because it wasn't clear what she was saying, and it wasn't clear what she was offering. And, people just didn't get it. And yet, God bless her, she was doing it over and over and over again. But I worked with her and we crafted her a talk where it, very clearly shared her story so people can really connect to her, shared, what, like simple things like, here's what I'm going to talk about today and why it's important. And, she would talk about things that they would need to learn, not about her business, but coming from her point of view as an expert. And then she'd make the offer to have a one-to-one connection with them to find out more. So I don't think she's been able to give those talks yet, but she was thrilled to death because she didn't have any confidence before. I don't know how she had the confidence to go all those times, not getting any bites, but she was thrilled to death being, confident and clear in her message to her target audience.
Yeah, I mean, eventually everything will clear up and she'll have an opportunity to certainly use that. So first thing's your signature talks, other things that you...
Yeah, I have a course called Show Up, Speak Up, and Get What You Want that'll be launching this fall. And that one it really takes people starting with who they are as their, the person in front of the room, how they show up, and then go into relationships, and we talk about image, we talk about your messaging and your journey story, and people want to hear where you come from. We talk about networking, we get into presentation skills and storytelling, and at the end, I guide people through being able to write their own signature talk.
Okay.
So I have that course coming.
Okay. So they can write multiple they're basically empowered to do whatever. Okay.
Right.
How long is that course?
It is 5 modules.
Yeah. I assume online. You're open to anybody.
Yes, I'll be training it online at first, like live, like Zoom at first, and having coaching, like delivering the material and then coaching people right then and there. And then there's worksheets and some things for them to do to figure out their own personal version of whatever we're working on at the time.
Okay. signature talks and your course. I don't want to say, is that it? Because that's a lot. But is there something else we throw in there or that you want to share with us?
Well, I can also work with people if they just say they already have a talk or they want coaching on public speaking. I can work with them on that. I can work with them on building a course and creating a course, not the tech part, but the design and filling in the course and, working with figuring out who their target market is and what their offer is and what they want to put out there and helping them get all those thoughts in order.
Okay, good. Best way for people to get a hold of you?
Website, DonnaRiccardo.com.
And we'll put that in the show notes, but you had also talked about earlier, we talked about the opt-in that you had mentioned.
Yeah, if people want to stay in the loop and know what's coming and what's happening when the course, when I start putting the messages out about that, I have 7 insider secrets to empower your public speaking. So it's a way to get some tips right away and then also get in the loop.
And that'll be on your website as well then?
It is on the website as well, yes. Okay.
Well, I really appreciate your time here today. This has been interesting. I appreciate both times you've been on. So it's you have a great story and you have a lot of useful insight that people can use. So thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.